Welcome to Critical Role Demystified, where I break down the lessons we can learn from episodes of Critical Role. I'm Mike Christensen, and today we're talking about episode 10 of the Vox Machina campaign, Kvarn Revealed. We have a full cast today, and this episode picks up with half the party in a cave and some undead rising up to attack them. These undead, which are probably ghouls, are apparently being directed by one of the other undead, giving them orders, which probably makes that a ghast. If you don't know what those are, it's literally just what it sounds like. They are undead, and ghasts are intelligent leader versions of them. Vax is attacked by the ghouls, and one of them gets a claw strike on him and paralyzes him. Tiberius moves Vax out of the way with an obelisk of stone, and then uses a fireball to incinerate the ghouls. And then Vex finishes off the ghast. They open a treasure chest without looking for traps, and a fireball goes off in the twins' faces. But they find some magic and they find some gold, so it's not a wasted trip. Then Vex notices a creature lurking near the ceiling nearby. A cloaker, a creature that can blend into the environment until it drops down and attacks, which is what it does. The party decides to just run back to the boat. Keyleth is still tied to the boat as a shark in the water, ready to pull the boat forward. And then they have a fight across the water as this cloaker flies after them. Man, the cloaker has a ton of cool powers that I never remember. Besides just being able to wrap up its enemies like its name suggests, it can make illusory duplicates of itself, and it can howl and make people afraid of it. As someone who tends to use more intelligent creatures as enemies, I apparently have really been sleeping on some of the more beast-like monsters. They eventually take down the cloaker, and they're able to take the body and skin it so that they have a cloaker pelt, basically, that they can use as camouflage. Keyleth also notices something swimming underneath the water, so that's something else they need to be wary of. They come to another cave, and in the back of the cave, they notice a strange, purple, misty, magical effect. Keyleth is able to investigate and determine that this is a portal. It's not an archway or a stargate or anything like that, but it is definitely a connection point to another plane. There are also a few Gricks. They're hovering nearby and looking for some sort of prey, but it doesn't seem like those came out of the portal. Those are just natural creatures that happen in caves in Dungeons & Dragons. They take a bomb that they have from the pre-stream game and throw it near the portal and detonate it with a fireball, which kills the Gricks, but does not do anything about the portal itself. We also get a moment where Vax asks Tiberius a question. Tiberius silences Vax. Scanlan dispels the silence, but Tiberius counterspells the attempt to dispel the silence, so Vax remains silenced. And then Tiberius just answers Vax's question, and then cancels the silence moments later for apparently no reason. If you're wondering why there are so few clips of this episode in today's video, this is part of why. The table was pretty unruly in this episode. Clarota determines that this portal leads to the Far Realm, and this must be how Kvarn came to the Underdark.
Clarota, is this a possible thing that we should maybe shut down? Could Kvarn send his allies through here?
We have not the power to shut this down. It is how they overlap.
Is it safe to be near it?
I don't know.
And then Keyleth uses some spells to close off this portion of the cavern so that the portal is no longer reachable from the outside. Vax is getting worried that the explosion they set off is going to let everybody know where they are. And others are getting nervous about being so near the portal, even though they did close it off. So they want to leave, but before they do, Keyleth wants to use the presence of the Far Realm and the fact that they are in a location where they don't plan to sleep to take this opportunity to cast a scrying spell on Kvarn. Since he came from the Far Realm, presumably, that should, in theory, help her ability to scry upon him. I'll summarize the description because obviously Matt has a rich, complex, detailed description he gives the players. That's probably not news to anybody watching this channel. Matt does a really good job describing things. But here's the gist. We see the inside of the temple, which is a pyramid, and there is a recently added metal structure like an upside-down Christmas tree hanging from the ceiling of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid used to be open to the air, but now there are some cross beams holding up this mechanical device. And there's glass as well. This device, which is channeling the same green mind-controlling magic that we've seen in the last couple of episodes, is hanging directly above the Elder Brain, the center of the Mind Flayer hive. There are also cages in the corners where some of K'Varn's test subjects, these mutated aberrations, are locked inside. And then she sees him. K'Varn is a floating ball of flesh with metal plates grafted onto his body as armor. Beneath the horn of Orcus in the center of his forehead, he has one large eye and a large toothy maw, and there are 10 eye stalks branching off of his body. K'Varn is a beholder, and K'Varn can apparently see or sense Keyleth's attempt to scry on him, and he laughs. And he once again reminds her that they are welcome to come and visit him. The horn glows with the same green energy, confirming that this mind control stuff is all tied into the horn in some way, maybe generated by it, or at least amplified by the horn. Then Keyleth takes some psychic damage and is thrust out of the scrying spell. This is the first moment in the show where somebody scries, so this is the perfect opportunity to talk about how Matt handles the scrying spell. First, in his games, he does not run it rules as written. In the book, it says that you can see the area where you're scrying as if you had your own vision. Yet, while we don't really see it come up in this specific example, there are many times when someone will scry and he will describe just what they are focusing their scrying on. And he'll say that the rest of the nearby details are blurred out and fuzzy because the spell targets a specific creature. There is a rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide that doesn't get talked about very often that does apply to this. I think this is the rule that Matt is leading on when he describes the scrying spell. It's on page 4. The D&D rules help you and the other players have a good time, but the rules aren't in charge. You're the DM, and you are in charge of the game. Huh, interesting. I guess it's fine for Matt to describe the scrying spell however he wants, and it's totally not a big deal. But let's actually dig into what he's doing when he describes a scrying spell. To start, he usually depicts the distance and the landmarks in between the scryer and the scrying destination.
You feel yourself drawn, pulled almost, like there's an energy that draws you, as if poison from a wound. It pulls you upward and you're looking down over the top of this entire cavern suddenly. The darkness tends to fade for a moment and you can make out the general outline of this island.
He does this with jump cuts, showing areas and then zooming in to get further and further toward the target.
Once again, your vision zooms in and shifts. You can look over the city. You can see Yogvaril over top. You can see the glowing aspects of the forest kind of surrounding the outskirts of it. And you can see in the center of this ruined city that has been reconstructed in the image of the Illithid, the temple that stands.
It's actually not too dissimilar to how he described Pike's vision as showing these landmarks on the way to K'Varn. Not only does that mean that he's approaching magic with an internal consistency, it also shows us what his goal is when he's describing a scrying spell. He wants to give the players something they can use to orient themselves in the vision, by basically showing them how they can get from where they are to the targets, or if they're far enough away that there's not a lot of useful information, at least showing the surrounding environment. He's making sure the players have actionable information. That's not required. You can absolutely just run the spell rules as written in your game. It's fine. And there are still times when the caster, usually Keyleth in Campaign 1, will try to discern more information than Matt is really willing to give them, because of how he visualizes the caster's vision in the spell. But when that happens, it's easy to forget how much information he's already given them in the first moments of the spell.
It is actually open, and that strange glowing source of green energy you can see is slowly emanating from the top. Your vision is pulled forward again. You feel yourself drawn towards it, and as you come towards the top, you can see the open portion of this temple's roof is a crossbeam made of gold or brass, and there is some sort of structure hanging from it that falls deeper into the temple. You then move past this into what is the topmost chamber of this temple.
Then, after those jump cuts and giving them a sense of the surrounding environment, Matt will draw their eye to the most relevant details he feels they need to know. Sometimes that's because he probably has something prepared in case they decide to scry, or he just knows which details would be extremely useful for the party to be aware of. In this case, he lingers at the structure hanging from the top of the pyramid, like a movie or a video game cutscene, because that is extremely important. Then he shows off the other creatures in the room, the Elder Brain and the cages with monsters in the corner. This is actually often how Matt describes any room the party goes into, and we'll probably talk about this another time.
You can see with this pulse, almost like a heartbeat of purplish energy, what look like small stones, small purple stones. But they're not stones. They're minds. They're brains. They're essences, and they're all working together, interconnected. You're looking upon the elder brain of Yogg-Varil. Your focus shifts now from the elder brain, and you look around the room, and in the dark shadows of this room, you can see there are cages.
But so often, he starts on the outside, on the perimeter, fills in the details, and then he describes the thing in the center of the room that very likely would be the first thing that anyone would notice the first time they saw the room.
And you feel a presence in the room suddenly. Your essence shifts around and you look in the darkness and you see, slowly drifting out of the shadow, a single gnarled black horn. Underneath that horn you can see now a physical form that it adorns. Dark brown leathery skin with slightly pointed edges, almost like scales that form out of portions of this flesh. You see below this horn one large, piercing, sky blue eye that glances up and meets your gaze.
He really takes his time here, drawing out the description in very careful detail. But everything he's telling them is important. Not only does he really want to paint a picture, because half of the party has no idea what a beholder is, and he wants to make sure to give them a verbal description before showing them the one that's on the outside of the player's handbook, because that's his style. But these details matter. Yes, his players had pretty much figured out that whatever K'varn is, he had the Horn of Orcus attached to his body. I think they'd actually deduced that from Kima and Pike's visions. But we specifically see it glowing with green energy, the same energy that we now associate with the control over the Elder Brain, the glowing light at the top of the pyramid. The same glowing light that glows in the eyes of the Duragar in the previous episode. The fact that K'varn experimented on himself by grafting metal plates of armor to his skin, yeah, that definitely matters. And then K'varn interacts with Keyleth.
So, guest, do you like my home? You're welcome anytime.
Which makes sense because we know that he could see through Tiberius's invisibility spell in the previous episode. And then he deals her some psychic damage, which, again, lines up with what we know. We know that he has mental control over the Mind Flayers and the Duragar, so this is not that shocking. But aside from the fact that K'varn knows that he's being scryed on, which the party often assumes that their enemies will be able to do for the next 7 years, and often that is actually not the case, and aside from the fact that he doesn't specifically say that anything in the room is out of focus, this is very much how Matt is going to run scrying scenes for the entirety of Critical Role. Liam, Marisha, Taliesin, and Orion clearly know what a beholder is. But once they're all on the same page, Percy and Vex go into planning mode, figuring out how they can remove the mind control effect over the Mind Flayers and free the city to rally them against K'varn. They decide to go over to the island and take over a small collection of what look like buildings near the beach. That way they'll be closer to the main city in the morning, and they'll be able to do some reconnaissance or just launch their attack from there. Percy attaches the cloaker skin to the bottom of the carpet so that the ones who go over first on the flying carpet will be better stealthed. So the stealthier or less armored members of the party, Vax, Vex, Scanlan, Tiberius, and Clarota, proceed over on the flying carpet to get their bearings. Grog offers Clarota some ale to help soothe his scratchy throat, kind of forgetting that Clarota's voice is entirely psychic, and Vex is about to let him know, oh, actually, you already emptied your cask. You used the last of it during an episode when you, Travis, were not here. But Matt seems to hand-wave it away. Clarota does take ale from Grog, so clearly Matt is saying, yes, there is ale. But then Clarota pours it out, because he's a punk. But Matt seemed to feel no need in that moment to correct Travis, although he will deal with that cask of ale in the next session. And how? Once they reach the island, Scanlan and the twins go to investigate, and they find a huge campsite for one figure. And Scanlan rolls a pretty bad stealth check, which turns out to be a problem when a purple-skinned giant with lumpy flesh appears. But we're going to pick up with that in the next episode. The players actually do a Q&A at the end of this episode, which lasts for more than an hour. A good chunk of it is just answering questions and filling in details about the game that they were playing before they were streaming. And that's actually pretty interesting. So if you're curious and you want to watch the Q&A, that section starts about 3 hours and 22 minutes into the episode. The link to the episode is in the doobly-doo below, as it is with all these videos. Here are a few highlights from the Q&A.
Like somebody wants you to say "fuck you, Dylan" for some reason.
Fuck you, Dylan!
That was amazing, actually.
That was really good.
A lot of conviction behind it.
Laura had written a short story just for her and Matt to read about how she met Trinket by rescuing him from hunters as a cub. Laura also says that if her character dies, she wants to roll up a tiefling, which I think is the earliest reference I have ever seen to the character of Jester. Matt is asked why he does not make natural ones fumbles or huge critical failures as they are in the tradition of D&D up to that point. And he says that he runs his games pretty hard, and if he were to run a natural one where it has a huge dire consequence, the party would probably have had a TPK by now. They get a lot of questions about what backup characters each player might have, or whether or not the game is going to continue with a different story after a TPK. They get a lot of questions about that. Part of me wants to point to this as evidence of the shift in the culture of D&D over the past 7 or 8 years, since those kinds of questions used to be a lot more common than the kinds of questions asked now about the motivations and personality of characters. Or maybe it's just because some of the assumptions that we hold true about actual play now, like that there will always be a new campaign after every old campaign ends, none of that was really established at the time because the actual play format had not come into its own. But really, I think this question just came up because everyone found out that Vox Machina is going to have to fight a beholder. So that makes all the questions about TPKs and character deaths kind of relevant. Taliesin says that Vex is probably her favorite character because of the intense emotional reactions to things that he really thinks are interesting or entertaining. Is this the earliest reference to a Percy Vex ship? Man, going back to these old episodes is fascinating. Liam gives a few answers about who his favorite character is, but does say that he likes a lot how Keyleth is klutzy, but also has all of this intense power. Probably not the first evidence of a Vax Keyleth ship, but still, fascinating. This is also the official moment when fans begin to self-identify themselves as critters. And when giving advice about how to start playing D&D, they're obviously aware that they have it very good with Matt. But Liam also says this.
And playing with someone who's not a crazy talented voice actor is still better than not playing.
Yeah.
So just find a DM and start a game.
And you know what? That feels like a pretty good note to end things on. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 11, The Temple Showdown. If you're watching along with us, I do not recommend that you watch this episode of Critical Role. The fight is pretty good, but this is generally thought of as one of the low moments of the Tiberius era, because he gets really annoyed with the other players during the K'varn fight. But my feelings about Tiberius and Orion notwithstanding, I've got kind of a hot take on this one. The situation in episode 11 is a lot more complicated than most critters seem to think it is. And the problem is not metagaming, as so many people seem to claim, it is miscommunication. And I would argue that not all of that is Orion's fault. But we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. You don't have to watch that episode of Critical Role, but I think it's an extremely important episode of this series, because there's a lot we can talk about in this one. But more on that in 2 weeks. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do that. You can subscribe and ring the bell to get these videos as soon as they come out, which, by the way, is every Monday and Thursday. You can join my Patreon. Any dollar amount really helps the show. But at $3 a month, you get access to some D&D stuff that I make for patrons. And you get to join the Patreon exclusive live streams. At $5 a month, you get access to videos a few days early. And at $10 a month, your name goes into the credits for that D&D content that I make. The third way you can support the channel is by joining the Discord and being a member of a community of people talking about D&D and actual play and putting together games. And the fourth way you can support is by joining my newsletter, where you will get occasional updates about what I've got going on. The links for all that are in the doobly-doo below. Until next time, play fair and have fun.